Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter 3 of our Mysteries of Southern France series. And today we're going to be going into the detail of the Church of Rennes Le Chateau. And we're going to be looking at some specific things today and a lot of dual elements that appears in what Saunière's put in the church. We're going to be looking at dual elements of the two main statues at the front door. We'll be looking at the dual elements of and the strange elements in the famous Fleury Mural. We'll be looking at some other statues that are placed in the church. We'll be looking at the possibility of two Jesuses at the back of the church. We'll be looking at as well the altar painting of Mary Magdalene that he painted himself and added to himself, as well as discussing what this crypt is and where the famous crypt might be found. So that's what we're going to look through today. I do want to let you know before we start that I'll be talking about the comment section at the end of the video and how I'm going to handle certain comments from now on, so that we're all on the same page with that. While we're looking at Rennes Le Chateau, I do want you to know that it's only just the focal point of the mystery. It's like the starting point of where we have to go. And you can't just study, a lot of researchers just study Rennes Le Chateau and think they can figure things out. And it's just a point where you have to begin, and it'll branch out from there. And we're going to branch out in quite a number of different directions as this goes on. But because this is the beginning point, we should start with the beginning point. But it reminds me so much of people who study ancient Egypt and only study the Great Pyramid for 3 or 4 months. And, never study the ones beside it, never study anything else on the plateau, never go to Dashur, never go to Abu Sir. It's like they study one thing in total isolation from everything else, as if that's going to get them some sort of knowledge or answer. And so while it looks like we're doing that right now with the story, that will change as the weeks go on. And I'm also cutting down the timing for you a little bit. Originally, I was doing this exactly the way the chapters would be in the book, and this chapter would have included not just the church, but would have also included the grounds, the tower, the garden, all the information about Rennes Le Chateau itself would have been chapter 3. But I want to try to keep these videos now to like in the 30-40 minute range. And so we're just going to look at the church today to try to keep it tighter, and we'll look at the grounds in the next video before we go on to the areas around this place. That's going to help me not feel like I'm getting to the end of something and running out of time, because there were some things about the paintings that I didn't mention in the last video, and so I'm going to mention them now for you, just so that you have those kept up to date. One is from the painter Gianciro, who had done the first Et in Arcadia Ego painting, and what I forgot to mention is that a few years later he painted a second painting. You can see the two paintings up there now, where he has the same two shepherds in almost the exact same pose, only now they're looking at it's called Apollo flaying Marsyas, a famous Greek myth. And you can see that where the figure laying on the ground is, the hands are almost at the exact point where the skull is in the other painting, and there's no question that I think these two he's giving you information about the one painting in the other painting. So you can, by unraveling a bit of the Apollo myth here, you're going to unravel a bit of what he's trying to say in the Et in Arcadia Ego painting originally. The second thing I didn't mention is this one here, which is the shadow that's created in the Poussine painting. And there's two parts to the shadow that the kneeling shepherd makes. One is that he makes a bow-like feature with his arm, which some have indicated could be the constellation Orion. Most are just looking where the fingers, the actual fingers are pointing, but if you look at his finger and his shadow finger, they reach a point almost exactly where the pineal gland or the third eye would be. And if you look at the second shepherd's finger, he's pointing right at the top of the skull of the shadow, which could represent the seventh chakra. And if you look just above the fingers and follow the rose line up, you see something that to me has looked like almost like an eye of Horus, sitting in the box. So I just wanted to point those out because I should have pointed them out in the last video, but due to due to the time factor, I skipped over a few things to try to get that done. And so the idea today is that we won't have to do that. So we're looking at the Church of Rennes Le Chateau, which was originally dedicated to the Virgin Mary, but was later changed to be a church of the Magdalene. What's important to note is that this is not the original church of Rennes Le Chateau. This is the church that was built for the nobles, particularly the de Hautepools and the Fleurys, who were the landowners and controlled the chateau. So this was a private church for the landowners, for the nobility. The regular people had a church at the other end of the village. I believe it's dedicated to John the Baptist. It might be Peter, but I think it was for John the Baptist. That church was burned down in the 14th century by Spanish invaders, so the story goes, supposedly looking for treasure. Now that seems strange. Why would they burn down one church looking for treasure when there's another church that would have been obvious that the nobles were using and would be a more likely place where treasure might be? They don't seem in the story to touch that church. So it's our first bizarreness in the story and our first strangeness in the duality story that continues through this entire mystery. Anyway, as the story goes, this church was later turned into the Church of the People. Saunier takes over in 1885 and begins his renovations in either late 1886 or 1887. The money seems to first come from the mayor of the village to do a little bit of renovation when he first got there, because it was apparently in very, very bad shape. In fact, his presbytery where he wound up living was in such bad shape for a number of years he couldn't even live there. He had to actually basically be billeted out with a family in town before his presbytery was actually fixed and he could go and live in it. So that's how run down the conditions were when he first got there. I'll go through some of the specific dates of what was done and when that was put in. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that now. No, I'll do that after the devil statue. I'll go through some of the details. But again, the story goes that in 1887 he begins renovating his church, finds these parchments. The parchments lead him to the gravestones, which lead him to the paintings, which lead him to a whole bunch of money, which lead him to, in the course of those new renovations, finding a crypt. The crypt of whatever the treasure is or whatever the knowledge is that's found in the crypt leads him to being one of the richest and most important people in France. So that's the basic timeline of the story. He changes the church in tremendous ways as he goes through this. The first thing he does is this is the current entrance to the church at Rennes Le Chateau, and it looks like you're just walking down an alleyway, which is kind of what it is. And the door, as you can see, it doesn't even face the alleyway properly. It's angled. It's a very strange way to enter a church. This isn't the original entrance to this church. That was in the west wall, and Saunier had that sealed up and covered over, and that's where the Fleury Mural is now on that west side wall on the inside. And he built this additional entrance, which is now the entrance to where you walk into the church, which is, again, strange. There's a lot of things on the facing of the front and the door and the symbolisms that are here. I'm only going to point you again to the Latin phrase of Jacob, how dreadful is this place? Terrible as locust is, right? And again, we don't know what Saunier is referring to by wanting this as being what people see when they walk into the church. Is he saying that the exterior world, the material world is dreadful? Is he saying the interior world of the church is dreadful? Is he saying the religion itself is dreadful? Is he saying the knowledge of the spiritual world is dreadful? Is he saying the dream state is dreadful? We have no idea what he's referring to, but that's one of the first things he wants people to see, and it's centered. It's like if you look straight above the door, that's the word you're going to see compared to everything else that's sitting there. When you walk in, and the thing that tends to draw everyone's attention is this devil statue. At least that's what it's called by most researchers. That's how it's referred as the devil statue. But Gerard de Sade's book, he didn't use that term. He called it Asmodeus, which is a figure in the Knights Templar religion. And the devil you see now is not the original devil that Saunier put in. That one had its head chopped off about 20 years ago, and they've made massive renovations to it, which we will get into. But this is the one you see now, so we'll go ahead. You could also refer to this figure, I think, as Rex Mundi, the Cathar god of the material world, the one who created the material. So it's hard, first of all, to say who or what this statue is supposed to represent. And we'll discuss a few of these. And you can't take this statue alone, because the statue mirrors another statue right across from it, which is the statue of John the Baptist and Jesus. And there's going to be tremendously dual symbolism and similarity between the two sets of statues. So I'm going to start talking with this, what we're going to call for now, the devil statue. I'm not saying it is the devil, but that's the name that's being normally used to it. But we're going to have to keep in mind and reference these other statues. That's why I wanted to tell you about them before we started. We see that the devil has his left knee to the ground, and the ground is a checkerboard floor. It's one of the first things Saunier put in when he did his renovations back in 1887, was to lay down the checkerboard floor. So the left knee is going to the ground, and his body is weighted down by an enormous water basin that he's carrying on his shoulders. Above his head is a base decorated with two salamanders, and it has a red or oval cartouche containing the letters B and S, which most people would assume stands for Bérenger Saunier, but another suggestion is that it could stand for Boudet and Saunier. It could mean something else with the B and the S. Above this are four angels that are making the sign of the cross, and below it has the Templar motto, very important, it's the motto of the Knights Templar, "In this sign you shall conquer." So he's adding potentially Cathar symbolism in the statue, he's adding Christian symbolism in the angels, he's adding Knights Templar symbolism in the sign. If you think of it in the four elements, each of the four elements are found in this little area, with the devil could be representing the earth, which leads me more to believe that it could be Rex Mundi. The holy water on his back is representing water. Of course, the salamanders represent fire, and the angels are signifying air. Showing even more of the fourness is that each of the angels' right hands is making one part of the cross. So you've got, again, these tremendously pieces of symbolism. Between the salamanders is a very interesting addition, and it's most definitely a pine cone. And the pine cone is often the reference to, in Hermetic symbolism, to the pineal gland, because they look very similar. It looks almost like a pine cone. So why does Saunier want the pineal gland on this structure? Because as I understand, you could purchase these similar statues at the time, and this is something that there's certain things that Saunier added personally. For example, the motto and the pine cone are something that's specifically done by Saunier. Recall that the famous scene in the Sistine Chapel ceiling, the figure of God looks like the human brain, and the arm that's reaching out to Adam is going through the pineal gland. So we want to keep this. Put into concept. Now the statue was ordered. Again, we'll go through some of the things that were ordered as we go along here. But the devil statue was specifically ordered and custom made. Oh, it's custom made, so it was made exactly to his wishes. And the invoice is dated June the 30th, 1897, which lists the statues of the cross for 800 French francs, the font with the devil and the sign of the cross costing 300 francs. So, like every part of the story, something is really odd with the statue. And again, I think it was 1996 that somebody came into the church and chopped its head off. And you're going to see this is the original devil statue that was in the church. The original devil statue, also you see it has an open left hand that was supposed to hold held a trident, actually, which apparently, so the story goes, Saunier removed within a year or two because it was tearing everyone's clothing as they were coming into the church. I'd be more likely to guess somebody stole it, just like they knocked the head off. But what's really bizarre is, of course, okay, someone knocked off the head and lost it, and it was lost. But when they remade it, you can see the two statues here together beside each other. you can see that they didn't make the head exactly the same. They made a completely different head for the new statue. And to make it even more odd, they repainted the garment that the statue's wearing. The original garment is blue and the new garment is green. So again, why would you put a new head on it and also repaint it in a different color? So something very, very strange is going on with the story. There's a message in the story. And if Saunier painted that statue blue, he wanted it blue for a reason. So what's one of these immediate signs that we're seeing of the head cut off? Well, that links, of course, to the statue across the way where John the Baptist has his head chopped off in the New Testament story. So again, you're seeing this very clear symbolism that the two sets of statues must be linked and are exactly the same. And it was as if in 1996 somebody felt no one's getting the symbolism, no one's getting the mystery, so they went ahead and chopped the head off with the idea of maybe somebody will get it now. If we go back and look at the knee of the devil resting towards the ground, it's just at the part of like I say, of the checkerboard floor. The skin is dark brown, and again, it was the one hand was holding. It had the circle of fingers that was holding the trident. The trident being a three-pronged staff, which represents the Hermetic process, and was held by one key Greek god, Neptune, I believe. Neptune might be the Roman version of it. Apollo with the trident. Somebody can look that up and give me the exact Greek figure who held the trident, but I think it was Neptune, Poseidon. And like I say, maybe the trident and the head are now in the same place. On the top of the left wing, we can see the dark color. You can barely see the dark color that was there. One suggestion is the statue is a greeter for those who enter the church, making it like an initiator. And that theory is attempting to link Saunier to being a Freemason. The maker of this statue, Guiscard, definitely was a Freemason, and is suggesting connection and symbolism of the pieces. The fact that the right knee is naked, as is the left shoulder, and its kneeing can be very similar to a frequent Masonic initiation sign of submission. And can also lead to by this sign you shalt conquer, gaining admission to of the organization or the knowledge or something based on the statue. Another researcher, Alan Scott, noted that there were 5 inscription marks on the shoulder of the devil. I think you can see them here, which are very strange because since the devil was a commissioned piece, it was specifically made by Saunier, it means that adding these little, what you can only call inscriptions, was a deliberate choice. They're very difficult to see, and you need to know they're there, and you need like a flashlight to properly see them. But what are they? In one sense, they could appear to be claw marks, as if something with 5 claws has ripped into the right wing, perhaps making it impossible to fly. 5 would be the number of Horus, and thus could suggest a wound by him. If someone wants to compare the statue to, say, being Set in the ancient Egyptian mythology, then the claw marks could be coming from Horus, they who have the battle so that Horus can beat Set, the conscious mind, and return himself to his father Osiris. That was another thing I forgot to mention from the previous video. This word scion, which appears so often in the story, also can have a meaning of the 4 key brothers and sisters in the ancient Egyptian Ennead myth, which would be Set, Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys. I'm just throwing that out. Some also suggest that the claw marks, what are calling inscriptions, are not claw marks, but could be the numeral 1 repeated 5 times. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, which if we think of it in computer terms, because computers all run on 1s and 0s, ons and offs, we would have 5 ons, and maybe this has something to do, if you think of reality as a computer program, has something related to somehow the fundamental makeup of the program known as reality. Again, the devil shouldn't be studied on its own. It works with the mirror at the opposite end, where here we see a statue which is also kneeling. Jesus is kneeling, and John the Baptist is standing. The Baptist is holding a banner that says, "Behold the Lamb of God." And remember, while the devil is carrying water on its back, Jesus' back is being baptized by John the Baptist. And again, so many have wondered of what the meaning of having these similar opposites across from each other. One of the suggestions is that the devil and Jesus are actually crouching down, both with a hand moving downwards, as if to suggest they're going to play some sort of game on the checkerboard floor below. Again, another suggestion has been the devil represents Set in Egyptian mythology. Jesus is representing Horus. So here Horus and Set are on opposite ends of the floor, preparing to do battle, symbolic as they have to fight after the death of Osiris. The adding of the figure John the Baptist makes this very, very odd that's the specific that he wanted. Didn't want to just put Jesus on the other side of this. He wanted to put John the Baptist there as well. Because we have to remember, in Cathar religion, John the Baptist would be considered the devil in this story, and that water baptism would be considered to the Cathars to be evil. So it's also interesting, is Saunier somehow presenting some sort of reverse role where the devil statue that everyone is thinking is the evil statue is actually the good statue, and the Jesus John the Baptist statue is actually the evil side of the duality? That they're hidden, they're hidden in the way you would think is being presented. Another is claiming, could there be many stories has there being two Jesuses, and we will see on the other side of the church that there's an indication that there's two Jesus. In Cathar religion, they talked about an evil and a good one. So are we seeing that portrayed, that the devil statue is actually Jesus, and one of the two Jesuses are the evil one, and one of the two Jesuses is the good one? So I'm just throwing all this out because just from these two statues at the front of the church, we have a massive amount of confusion as to what's being presented. Between the two statues is the confessional, which is like the stupidest place you should put a confessional in any church. Some are suggesting it's there to hide one of the crypt entrances, but that's what's in this little small front entrance when you go. And I've been mentioning the incredible mirror images around the church, and there's so many. The N on Saunier's tomb is turned around. All of the 14 stations of the cross are placed in reverse order. The Visigothic pillar that is placed outside to commemorate the dedication of the church is upside down. The west wall of the church has a fresco of winter. The east side is a fresco of the summer. When you go to the altar, this picture will show it here, we have on one side of it, Joseph is holding a baby, and on the other side of it, Mary is holding a baby. And it's odd because this is implying that there are two Jesus babies, as if the Jesus figure has a twin, which has been claimed in many certain Gnostic documents that the Jesus birth was a twin, and often called the twin Thomas. Again, the two Jesuses might be relating to the second Jesus being Satan, as per a certain Cathar story that Jesus and Satan are brothers, similar to Osiris and Set being brothers. Again, you're looking at just mere elements of everything in this church. We have a receipt dated the 5th of June, 1887, that shows the first renovations were done to refloor the church in a checkerboard formation. A new altar was added for 700 francs, donated by supposedly a wealthy benefactress of the monarchist, Madame Cavalli, in July 1887. The new stained glass windows came in at a cost of 1,350 francs. That started in April 1897. In 1896, Saunier commissioned the sculptor and painter Guiscard, who we mentioned, of Toulouse, to make all of the statues. So that includes the statues of the saints, the Stations of the Cross, the baptismal font of the devil, the John and Jesus statue, and including the bas-relief of Jesus on the Sermon of the Mount above the confessional. All of these were chosen from a catalog that he had, or most of these were from a catalog other than the devil statue. But Saunier added personal painting and markings to every object. So no object was direct from the catalog and just put on display. Saunier did something to every single thing that he ordered in order to make it unique. The last thing that was added later was paintings, which included the Magdalene altar painting and the Fleury Mural. So let's start with the Magdalene altar painting. So this altar painting that was placed underneath the, of course, the main altar, and it's really unique because Saunier didn't make it, but he painted it. So he personally painted this, and that gives us extra emphasis for the study. So we see that Mary is kneeling inside a cave with her hands in a strange interlock fashion. The landscape is slightly visible behind her. In front of her we have a skull, an open book, and she stares at an acacia bush that makes the sign of the cross. Now, normally there's similar scenes that are painted like this in other churches, and there will always be a vase of perfume, the perfume that she used to anoint the feet of Jesus, but it's not in this painting. That's very, very interesting, because even the statue here that you see right now that is in the Rennes Le Chateau church has the vase of perfume. This particular altar painting doesn't. Her clothes are very simple. She's wearing a brown skirt and a red belt. On top, she's wearing a piece of yellow clothing with long sleeves. And again, the oddly painting interlocking fingers, in one sense, probably represent the interlocking of the two minds. It's a very specific hand gesture for knowing a great secret. In fact, it's the hand position that Jean Cocteau, the famous French painter from the 1860s, but when he died and was laid to rest, his fingers were placed in that position, even though the fingers had to be broken, I believe, to put them in that position. That's the position they wanted the fingers in at his death. Remind you that in Hermetic terms, the symbolism of the skull is a symbolism of the egoic mind that has to be overcome, or you might say killed. That's not the correct term, but it must be overcome. And recall that there was a skull found at Rennes Le Chateau with a ritual slot in the top, and this further represents that there is this need to drill or knife into the mind to rid oneself of it. Biblically, the skull is representing Golgotha, right, the place of the skull, and this is the place that symbolizes the inner hermetic work, the work of inner knowledge. So if you read through the Golgotha story in the New Testament and turn it into this, how do I relate that to my inner knowing and inner seeking, that will be explained. Originally, there was text underneath the altar that seems to have been removed around 1970, and there have been a lot of opinions as to what the text actually was. Thankfully, we got lucky because there was a photo taken of Noel Corbu, the gentleman from the 1950s, happened to be taken in front of this altar, and lo and behold, the inscription was able to be read right under it. In a sense, it's a piece of bad Latin that sort of says, Jesus, you remedy against our pains, and only hope for our repentance is through Magdalene's tears that you wash our sins away. So it's interesting that the phrase indicating that it's important that the Magdalene and her tears are a driving force in the washing of the sins of people. That it's not just Jesus that can do this alone. Jesus is requiring the Magdalene in the washing of other people's sins. If you also noticed, in the background of the cave is an open book. Will I show the other ones here? I can just show the similar. You might get a better view of what the painting looks like. I'm going to put it up now. There's a couple of similar paintings in this part of southern France that have also been done that were done a little earlier, that this was obviously based on, and you can see you can maybe see the image a little better there, and particularly the interlocking fingers. But we've got the open book. In the distance are claimed to be castles. At least that's what some say. Some are trying to say they match the Custassa chapel, where the priest Gilles was murdered, by people who are trying to link Saunier to the killings, trying to say he painted it in the background as some sort of inner confession. Others say it's the mountain Cardew in the background. Other rumors claim it's a J and an M for Jesus and Mary. Other suggestions have claimed it's Rennes Le Chateau, it's the Tour Magdala, it's an arch representing Arc. All sorts of possibilities you're going to find. Again, there are other paintings that are similar, like this one the one you're seeing, 1850 painting by German artist Johann Flatz. There was another found in 2009, or had been found a little earlier than that, in a church of Nofelles Avila in Austria, But then once it had been put on the internet and talked about that it was there, the painting was removed in 2009. It just disappeared and nobody knows where it is. What's interesting is the group, what I'm calling the Perilos group. There's a group that tries to link the mystery to the area of Perilos. So they have an entire website and write a number of books. But they also found another similar painting in the town of Belpech, about 50 kilometers west of Rennes Le Chateau, in the funeral chapel. But this is a statue of Mary, not a painting, almost exactly to Saunier's altar painting. She's in the same kneeling position with the same interlocking fingers, an identical type of color of the clothing. All of the objects are there except the skull. The skull is missing in that particular statue, but the perfume vase is there. So we have to ask, why does this one statue not have the skull, and why does Saunier's not have the perfume? If I think of it in Hermetic terms, if it only has the perfume, it's indicating she is still in work role. Part of the anointing of the feet is part of the journey she's making to reaching her total self. If the perfume is gone and the skull is present, the skull would be, it's switching over, that the work is done, that you might say the death of the self has been completed, and so there's no need for the perfume veil because she's not doing that work anymore, and the skull can shown to be completed. Of course, the open book represents the knowledge that she's taking in, or the open book representing the knowledge she's putting into the book. You can think of it as a two-way street of how that's going. There are a number of statues in the church. We'll just go to a couple of the interesting statues that are here as well. I have to go back to my notes and change them around. So we've got 5 statues of saints, which lay out in a particular order that people like to try to spell the word Graal, of Germain, Roche, Anthony de Padoue, Anthony the Hermit, and Luke. And their positions between them, you could draw an M to where they are standing, supposedly representing the Magdalene. We also have the Magdalene statue in the church, which is interesting because it's on the opposite wall. On the opposite wall is the devil statue. So again, we're looking at these interesting continuous inversions. The 14 stations of the cross, which generally are always placed in a clockwise order of the church, are placed in reverse order. They run backwards in the church. And there's only 2 other known churches in France that has a similar backwards layout of the Stations of the Cross, that being Perpignan and, interestingly, St. Sulpice. Here they begin at the pulpit on the east end of the nave, and they run anti-clockwise along the north wall, finishing on Station 14, the nave of the south wall, near the statue of St. Anthony. There's very odd things about these particular stations that he's chosen. You can go through each of them in detail. I'll leave the link to one of the sites below where you can see nice full images of all of them. I'm just going to point out some of the things that are often pointed out. In Station 1, we have a young black African boy delivering a pitcher of water. In number 8, we see the young child wearing a Scottish tartan, which some claim is alluding to Scottish Freemasonry. In the 10th one, we see that the dice are rolled. One die has a 3, one die shows a 4, and the other die will show a 5, and that makes the 3, 4, 5 famous right angle triangle. Station 14 is also very odd in that it's supposed to be the sun in that painting, to be at this early morning when Jesus is being carried out of the tomb, but here it's being turned into a moon, and in fact it seems like someone has a torch in there, which again, it makes it strange because Jesus is supposed to be buried during the day. Is he now saying that, I changed it a little oddly there. Jesus is supposed to be buried during the day, and that's what the scene of the cross is supposed to be showing. So is Saunier saying that Jesus is being put in the tomb at night, or is he saying that he's being taken out in the night? He was put in during the day, and now Saunier is trying to symbolically show he's being taken out in the evening. Okay. 2 more small things. So, and again, you can look through this church on your own in unbelievable detail. I'm just trying to, you might say, give you some of the highlights to really start thinking of what's the deal with the symbolism that he wanted to create. And it's a very small church. It's not a big church. When you think of the big massive cathedrals, and even some of the other churches around Rennes Le Chateau are quite large. Rennes Le Chateau church is really, really small. But he's packed a lot of symbolic detail into this church. Here we look at one of the more interesting things in there, and that is known as the Fleury tableau. It's on the wall where the balcony used to be, and it's a really impressive thing. We can see that it's a commemoration of some say it's Jesus on the Mount, with 11 mourners around him, and behind of which we see scenes of the countryside. At least that's how it all appears on first glance. But let's look at it in a bit of detail. First, the middle scene. So in the middle scene, among the people surrounding Jesus, we see two oddities right away. At the top left are boys wearing Victorian clothes. So some are suggesting that this is actually Saunière and his brother Alfred, that they have somehow painted themselves into the painting. Most people are drawn to the sack, which is being suggested at front to be gold, and which seems to have a hole in it, and what's inside is spilling out. But it's not clear if it's coins in the bag, if it's nuggets, and of course, gold nuggets in the Hermetic term is a slang for large chunks of wisdom. Above is the phrase in French, "Venez à moi, vous tous qui souffrez et quietez accessibles, et je vous soulagerai." Come to me, all ye who suffer and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, which is from Matthew 11:28-30. However, the normal way this should be written is with the word affliege, not accabelas. And it's a slight difference in meaning from being distressed, those who suffer, to being overwhelmed. But it also shows that Saunière painted a very thin line between the S and the A of the accabelas, which could also indicate a new set of words, which is claimed to be sac à bless. The sack is a bag. Bless usually means corn, but can also be a slang for money. So again, is this an interesting pointer to the sack of something being, and the people who are in this as a treasure hunt, that Saunière found treasure, try to point to this, that this is indication that he's saying he found gold, but of course, what really is the treasure? Is it the sack in the front that no one's paying attention to? Is it Jesus that's talking? Is it the scene itself? Yeah. But let's look at the sides of this painting. And it's really, really interesting because we have what appear to be two separate scenes. But if you take out the middle area, if you take out the Jesus on the Mount, or some have also claimed it's another symbolic moment. I'll have to put it in the comment. I'll have to put it in the description. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But if you take that out and you see when you put the two sides together, what you get is one continuous drawing. So it's also, these things are not, they're trying to tell you they're not separate. They are continuous. They're a continuous image in the background. And also very interesting, you notice that the left side is being shown in summer. So the left side is full of leaves and flowers and full bloom, while the right side is winter and there's no flowers and everything is barren. So you're getting your first, if you're looking carefully, you're getting the duality right away in the painting. Some suggest that the castle on one side is Rennes Le Chateau and the other is Custaza. But it's hard to really know what's being presented. We do know that the painting was indeed for the Fleury family, who were buried at Rennes Le Chateau, that we'll get to when we discuss Rennes Le Chateau. And that's kind of why it's called the Fleury tableau, made for Fleury, and that's another symbolic piece of the Jesus and the disciples in the center of it, that it's related to the Fleuries and to the flower. On the right side, we're going to see a broken pillar, and the broken pillar is often a key element in ancient wisdom. You see this in Greece and in Rome a lot, where it almost like they've presented a pillar and they want it to be broken. It's not like it's been broken over time, it's been damaged, it's been It's the pillar. The pillar is broken to symbol for a very specific symbolic reason. You can also see painted in here what is claimed to be the baluster, the very baluster that Saunier supposedly found the parchments in. So, and again, this is Saunier putting these in the painting. So he's got a broken pillar, and he's got what is supposed to be the thing that he found the parchments in. So that's very strange. If you look further in the background, it looks like an old person dressed in black, but it's hard to tell if this is meant to be a man or a woman. Some say they're leaning on some sort of walking stick. Others say that the figure's holding on an umbrella. Many have suggested that the figure is Saunier in the background, because there are many pictures. He was known to always walk around with an umbrella all the time, even when it was not raining. And of the very few pictures that we have, I think we have maybe 20 or 30 photographs of Saunier total. There's 2 for sure where he has an umbrella in the photo. Some have also suggested that this could be Marie d'Arnaud in the photo. There's a very interesting painting all of Mary Magdalene, done by Dutch master Jan Van Sorel. And I'll try to find this painting online again and put picture up here for you. But they have a bent over figure almost exactly the same to Saunier's in this painting. And in fact, the landscape of the Dutch painting is also similar to what Saunier has here on the wall. So we're wondering, is there a link between the painting in Rennes Le Chateau and the painting of Jan Van Sorel? Or is Saunier wanting someone to look into this painter's work, or something about the painter, maybe not the painting specifically, but something about the painter? I'm just throwing that out. There is also something missing in this right side of the painting, and for that you need the famous Saunier postcards. Back in 1907, he made a set of 33, exactly 33, of course, the Freemasonic initiation number, postcards of the church. They're quite interesting to dig through, and again, I'll leave a link. The Rennes Le Chateau NL, I think, site has all 33 postcards for you to look at, so you can look at that site below if you want to look at them. And we see one of the postcards has the Fleury tableau on it. And right next to the umbrella figure is a bush and a box. But when you look at the painting in the church today, the spot where the box should have been seems like it's been brushed over in a very amateur-like fashion to make it look like a hill or a rock. While the left side of the bush is no longer any more the same as the other side of the bush. So why did somebody feel the need to get rid of the box from the painting, which is almost impossible to see? You would have to even know it's there to go looking for it. But they wanted to make sure the box was taken out of the painting. So if the figure is Saunier, some have suggested that the painting is a symbolic diagram of where you can find something in the exterior landscape, that the box represents not necessarily a specific box, but it's representing. It could represent a tomb out in the landscape. It could represent something buried. It could represent something that you can find from the standpoint just of knowledge or understanding, and that the painting in itself was giving you directions as to where that was. So people wonder if that's why they had to take the box out of the painting. Okay, the last thing we'll talk about here before we end this video will be a little bit about the crypt. And because we know that there is and should be a crypt in this church. It's actually mentioned in documents of the 1700s of burials and things happening within the church. So it's definitely there. It was a burial place of the nobles, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. If you dig into the research, you'll find that the church was consecrated in 1050. The crypt was consecrated in 1059 by the Bishop of Narbonne, and if true, that makes it one of the oldest commissioned crypts in France. There's suggestions that the crypt is actually part of a much earlier church that had been built on the site, which itself had been built on an ancient site of worship, likely an Isis temple. That's more. Almost every church, particularly churches you're going to find in Europe, are almost always the real oldest ones are built on an ancient site, whether it be a temple of Isis, a temple of Diana, a temple of Horus, a temple of whatever. So there's, if they'll let you into the basement, into the lower grounds of these churches, you'll find what's left of the original first temple that was there before the later Christians took over and built their stuff on top of it. So some feel that the crypt is somehow linked to this original temple that was there underneath the church. The problem is, of course, how do you get to the crypt? Because as of right now, the crypt doesn't seem to exist, and no one is talking anything about it. In fact, Rennes Le Chateau has put a law in place where no digging or archaeological excavation of any kind can be done anywhere in the village, which of course includes the church. So nobody, for any reason, can do any kind of digging in any part of the church or the village. Because the crypt is one of the most important pieces of the whole mystery. It's supposedly where Saunier finds the most important. It's either treasure, if you believe it's treasure. It's knowledge, if you believe it's knowledge. It's bodies or proof of the tombs of somebody biblically important, or it's I don't know, like I said, where the devil was imprisoned. It's whatever you might believe the story's leading to. It's the crypt under Rennes Le Chateau that is the unlocking piece of the story. The question becomes, where's the crypt? We begin to think that now from the research that there may have been several entrances to this crypt, not just one as would normally be thought. And a lot of the work Saunier was doing was to hide all of the various entrances after he had done whatever he was doing down there, figured out what he was supposed to figure out. He then did a lot of the renovation of the church was done just to seal off the crypts. One suggestion is that the odd confessional that I mentioned out near the front door, where no confessional in the Catholic Church would be, is one that was specifically bought by Saunier, and it also came with a very new thick floor. If you see it, you'll see that the floor by the confessional is really, really different and really thick than the rest of it. And some suggest that it's to hide possibly hollow sounds as you walk over it, to indicate that there's a set of stairs underneath it. There was a set of double arches that was found in this area, very similar to the arches that appear on the Knight's stone, supposedly the stone that Saunier had found laying over top of the crypt entrance that he pulled off. And that was in this particular area, but Saunier had the double arches fixed over, and a bulwark placed over top as if to seal off the area, and the double wall arch was redone. Another very odd location is this one. It's known as a round room known as a sacristy on the side of the church. You see it better from the outside here. You pretty much don't see it from the inside. It's a secret room. You can only enter it through first a small room, which is where Saunier would change his clothes before going to give mass. And there's a mirror over which has a text, "Give virtue to my hands, O Lord, that being cleansed from all stain, I might serve you with purity of mind and body." It also has a very spectacular stained glass window of Jesus on the cross with Mary praying at her feet. But she's not looking at Jesus. She's looking at the Virgin Mary standing beside her. There's also another figure in this painting, which is a man, which has no identification as to who that might be. Also, both Jesus and Mary have red hair, which is, of course, an oddity to the story. From there is his changing closet. I think it's his changing closet, and in the back of the changing closet is a false wooden back to it, of which contains a small wooden door, which opens into this round room. And the round room is very barren, has just a stone floor, and it was supposed to be that when it was discovered, it was explained that this was the place that an Amchorus once lived. An Amchorus being a female hermit, that there were certain saintly figures who wanted to live an isolated life. So why someone would want to live in this round, strange room at the back of Rennes Le Chateau Church that has only a very small window, gets very little air, almost no sun, has a stone floor, has nothing else possibly within it, seems a bit odd. Of course, one suggestion is that this round room was built over what was another entrance to the crypt. I'll put up, I think if I haven't put it up already, I'll put up a picture of some suggestions of how many entrances again there are to the crypt, and one of them would be where this round circular room is. Another entrance was suggested to be in the cemetery, exactly where the tombstones of Marie de Negra were placed, and that was supposed to conceal that tomb entrance. Other locations of suggestions as to where the crypt could have been accessed, because some suggestions have tunnels underneath the complete of Rennes Le Chateau. And in fact, some that go from the top, they claim go from the top of the mountain where the village is, all the way down through the mountain to the valley floor below, which makes a tunneling work similar to the underground that's at Giza. I mean, Giza is an underground masterpiece that has been tried to be hidden from everyone for hundreds and thousands of years. In fact, what's below ground at Giza might even be greater than what's above ground, and there seems to be an entire network. Certainly, we have networks that used to run between the church and the chateau and the other church and other areas. We pretty much know from people who had talked about it who were alive 100 years ago that spoke of these tunnels. So there's no doubt that there could be many entrances to a crypt using these various tunnel areas. So others that have been suggested are under his office, and we'll get to his office in his library when we talk about the area around there. Another in the presbytery. We'll talk about that when we talk about the presbytery in the next video, because we recall that in September 21, the equinox, 1891, Saunier's diary notes claim 3 specific events for that day: got a letter from Grains, discovered a tomb, rain in the evening. Again, he's presenting that the tomb is a minor thing. It's just a casual mention, the same as the rain. But could this just be a very short note for his memory? A little something that he doesn't want anyone to know just what he's really discovered, but it's just his own little small marking of what he's found on that day. Lastly, we'll add, when it comes to the church, the very strange phenomenon that used to be associated with the blue apples. If you remember, we've got the dates of January 17 recurring over and over in the story, and we've got the end of the supposed parchment having this phrase blue apples, which I suggested might be related in some way to the Holy Grail, or to grapes being a clue word of the Cathars. And this January 17 date, again, has so many parts of the story. It's the feast day of Anthony, as well as the Church of St. Sulpice. It's the day Marie de Negra is supposed to have died. It's the day that was the first pathway to death that Saunier took in 1917, that's the date he had his collapse. It's also supposed to be the day that Marie de Arnaud got sick in 1953. It's supposed to be the day that the priest of Rennes-le-Bain before Boudet died, Father Jean V. It's also the date that the very strange Serpent Rouge that we'll get to was dated as being written, January 17, 1967. And this date is tried to be connected with this blue apples reference. And supposedly an event used to happen in Saunier's church. We can say used to happen because we don't know what's happening based on today, but supposedly on January 17 and a few days prior and before, a beam of light around noon would shine through one of the plate glass windows and make that beam land on the opposite wall of the church into an image that many people wanted to believe were blue apples. If this was not by accident, if this was done by design, then the construction was just as important as in ancient temple building, which would often have shafts of light on key days of the year would fall on a particular icon or a particular marker in that temple. So if this was done by Saunier, then he wanted the January 17 date to have the particular beam of light. Now you can only see the event on photographs. And there only appears to be just many colors on the wall when you see the photographs, some of them shapes. There's certainly nothing in any of the photographs I've seen that can suggest they were apples or that they're specifically blue. I could just call the color phenomenon of the wall, yellow lemons, green onions. The window itself that makes the reflection, though, is showing the resurrection of Lazarus. where the dead body is arising from the tomb. And the window is very similar to two other windows of the church. In the choir to the left, we see Jesus visiting the house of Mary and Martha in Bethany. And on the right before the choir is the mission of the apostles. And then next is the resurrection of Lazarus. So all three windows are identical in style, are using similar motifs to illuminate them, including 3 roses laid out as 2 blue roses at the bottom, 1 pink one above. So whatever's happening from the stained glass windows, it was linked, but it doesn't happen anymore. The mayor of the village had the sun to the window blocked so that the sun could no longer shine through the stained glass window and onto the wall. Why exactly they would want this oddity stopped is just another bizarre point in a strange story. You would think you'd get a lot more visitors on January 17 that would want to keep taking the photographs of the wall. But again, you've got, if they're going to cover over a box, if they're going to chop off the head of a devil, they might as well stop the sun from shining through a window to put something on the wall. So, that's our look at Rennes Le Chateau Church. I'm sorry I don't have a lot of answers for you from what we've taken so far. We're still digging through the massive presentation of information that involves this story. But hopefully you can see that this one small building is a year of study of just, and again, I've just gone through some of it. There's way more if you want to go through the specific Stations of the Cross, and you want to go through all the statues, and you want to go through all the stained glass windows, and you want to go through the columns and the position of the columns and the mathematics in the columns. But I'm going to leave it there. We will do this again in a week when we will go through the external part of the Rennes Le Chateau Church. We'll go through the garden, we'll go through the tower, we'll go through the presbytery, we'll go through other areas of the town, and we're going to go through that. We'll start showing how geometry starts building into the story. Depending how much time that takes, I'll either get into the geometry of the landscape around Rennes Le Chateau in southern France, or we may have to save that for for chapter 5. I said I was going to end with a short discussion of the comment section of how that's going to go, because I got a bit surprised, I think, by some of the intensity, we might say, of the comments that arrived, and the style of the comments that arrived over just a couple of minutes of that video that I didn't really explain myself very well anyway. It's sometimes challenging in a video. If you've never done this, it can be very challenging to try to present things just on video, talking them straight out, as opposed to if you've got a group of 15 or 20 people or 30 people with you, which I'm used to how I'm doing talks. They can ask for clarification. You just said this. What do you mean by that? Oh no, yeah, I know. That's what I said, but I kind of really mean this and this and this. And then they can respond back to you, and you can rehash any problem that comes up, or miscommunication from me gets at least, and everyone doesn't necessarily continue to agree with it, but at least they can, okay, this is at least what he's meaning by this. Okay. Much harder to do in a video. However, when it comes now to comments, how I'm going to handle it is, if anyone wants to produce a comment to show that they are smarter than me, or wants to get in an argument to show that they are far more intelligent than I am, I'm going to just acknowledge now, you're smarter than me. You've read more books than me, you've traveled to more places, you have gained far more meetings with very interesting people, so we don't need to have that discussion. I already admit you're smarter than I am. Your mind is far superior. We don't need to have these discussions anymore. We don't need to discuss unbreakable belief systems because you're smarter than I am. However, for the rest of the people who believe we might be equal in our background and our knowledge and our intellectual level, and want to share further information that might be of value to the community as a way for all of us to dig into whatever subject we're studying, or into, of course, ourselves and reality, then by all means, leave those comments and we will continue to try to use them to go in a particular direction. So that's how I'm going to follow from now on, that I'm not going to get into intellectual battles with people. You're smarter than I am. And for the rest of us, we will we will work together and collaborate and try to take us to the next level with this. I will do a video, I believe. I'm going to redo my fairy tale chapter in the middle of this week. So that's what I will come up with the symbolism of some famous fairy tales. I will put together the Rennes Le Chateau next video for next week, and then we will see where that takes us from that point. Thanks again for watching, for subscribing, for comments that you make, for your questions that you leave, and for the people who have made some donations on PayPal. It's all appreciated. The books you bought. The BitChute channel will be listed below so that you know where that is. BitChute can be really hard to find stuff just by trying to search on there. It's a terrible search engine for finding anything. If you don't know the person's channel by name, you can't, like, by the actual web address, you can't find it. So it's there just for those of you who know that exists. And let's see how things go next week. The world changes on a weekly basis, and we'll see where we are when we do the next video. Cheers.